name. Chair now recognizes Ms. Tokuda from Hawaii. How'd I do?
You did great. Thank
All
you,
right.
Mr. Chair.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Good morning, good afternoon, Admiral Harris, Dr. Sisson. Thank you so much for being here on our very first hearing as incoming freshmen. You know, we've talked a lot about this balloon, so I'm not going to belabor the point except to say that it was an unacceptable violation of our U.S. sovereign airspace, and I fully support the President's actions to shoot it down in a manner that did not put any U.S. lives or property at risk. What concerns me about this incident, though, was the whirlwind of outbursts here in the United States that highlighted just how tense the political leaders of our country are when it comes to the PRC and when they are involved. As we saw this past week, we now have an environment here in the U.S. where these types of incidences, intentional or not, trigger rushed reactions amongst our political leaders to pressure the President and our military leaders to be tough on the PRC. What this committee should be worried about is what happens in the event of a more dangerous incident, especially as PRC assets in the South China Sea and Western Pacific act more and more recklessly. We saw it just last December when a PLA military jet came within 10 feet of one of our Air Force planes. As our relationship with the PRC grows more and more challenged and our ability of our governments to cooperate whenever there is an incident continues to decline, how does this politicalization of our relationship with the PRC and the growing political pressure of one-upmanship increase the risks of undesired confrontation and affect our national defense?
I think that's a good depiction of a lot of the reaction to this particular incident, and it's a mechanism, precisely as you say, to highlight how important crisis management is and being able to have connections at the top level of governments to make sure that these things don't spiral out of control unintentionally. I think part of the dynamic, and hopefully we're coming to a little bit of you know, sort of, we had this sort of very heightened awareness sort of a sudden about the PRC and the PLA's development. And now hopefully we can get our bearings a little bit more. Remember that we are starting from a place of great national advantage, not just militarily, but across all other domains. And we can return ourselves to focusing not being on tough on China or worrying about being soft on China, but we can really just focus on being on smart on China instead. And any event that can move us back to remembering that, I think would be well used.
Admiral?
Yeah, I'll just say it that it's important to have these connections, either mill to mill, government to government, diplomatic connections with the PRC, arguably more now than ever. Again, at the height of the Cold War, we had those relations, particularly mill to mill, Navy to Navy, with the Soviet Union, which helped diffuse a lot of issues that we had. We don't have that to the degree that we had with regard to China, and we need to work on that. I think the Secretary of State's visit would have helped, and it was China's own, I guess you could call it their own goal, in the sense of the balloon fiasco, which caused him to have to postpone his trip. Hopefully it'll get back on track, and we'll have those government-to-government relationships start anew with Beijing.
Thank you. You know, just building up on that, Congress has really been playing the leading role in strengthening the U.S.-Taiwan relationship under the foundations laid out with the Taiwan Relations Act way back in 1979. Going forward, more recently, we had the Taiwan Travels Act, we've had the Taipei Act just last Congress, we had the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act, although I would note we need to follow that up with an appropriation if we are to take Dr. Sisson's recommendation seriously and assist them with FMF assistance as well. I strongly support these measures because they are appropriate responses to the PRC's unrelenting campaign to try to isolate Taiwan from the international community and to unilaterally make the question of Taiwan's future secure in their interests. At the same time, the PRC's government has made it clear that with the moves that they have seen from the United States, and it is still committed to retaliate and use force against the United States, especially when it comes to the issue of Taiwan. How can we continue to strengthen our relationship on one hand with Taiwan and deter the PRC from further military aggression against Taiwan, while at the same time preventing destabilization, if you will, of cross-strait and U.S.-China relations that heightens the risk of conflict between our two countries?
So that's higher math for sure, all of that. I do think that we must not, as I mentioned in my remarks, we must not allow the PRC to dictate our policy with regard to Taiwan or any other country. So that's the first thing. And I think at a country like the United States, we can do both. You know, I've
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lalo.